Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast, Yeti Walks into Basecamp. I am Yeti Legs, and you'll notice that Basecamp, unfortunately, is not here for this episode, but that's okay. The show must go on, does continue, and we have three great people to fill up the audio space, the audio black hole for you. Myself, and we also have Jesse and Elena with the Subaru Leave No Trace team. This is going to be the second part of the two-part episode for the Subaru LNT team. The first part, we got into a little bit more of who Jesse and Elena are, their backpacking experience, and then we touched a little bit on their education and the first two principles of Leave No Trace. So if you know anything about Leave No Trace, there are 7 core principles. So that leaves at least 5, but really 5.5 more to discuss, and a few more other questions that we have for Jesse and Elena. And we really think that this is a helpful but also informative and enjoyable episode. Let us know what you think after you get done listening to it. We always value everyone's opinion for our episodes, and any feedback you have, both positive or negative, please let us know. We've been getting a few more emails to our YETIWALKSINTOBASECAMP@gmail.com, which is our podcast email. And I got to say, we love receiving those, and especially getting a lot of good energy from people. So I'm just going to give everybody a fair warning here, and I apologize in advance. But between the first and the second part of our episodes, I was actually disconnected from Jesse and Elena, and it appears that whenever I rejoined the session and we resumed recording, that it stopped picking up audio from my microphone and started picking it up from the computer microphone, so the laptop microphone that was about 3 feet away from me. So that's why it sounds like I am in a tunnel and in some alternate reality. So again, I apologize. The content is all still there, but my audio quality just sounds a bit like garbage. So enjoy my hot mess audio with the great audio and content from Jesse and Elena. That being said, buckle up, put your headphones in, or turn your car on and listen to the episode. All right, enjoy.
Yeah, and one big impact that we see in terms of camping is the campsite creep, where camp sites get wider and wider as people not only walk off of their little area to go to the bathroom, but also they might be collecting firewood, they might be getting water. And so we want to be conscious that this phenomenon happens as more people come to camp in the same location, just through general use and trampling of the vegetation. The ground becomes compacted, and it's really hard for vegetation to start growing again, even if it's the season later. And so then people see larger campgrounds the next time they visit, and they think that they can camp further and further away from each other and things like that. And then we just see this completely compacted area. That happens a lot around water sources and places where people are moving around a lot. And so by kind of consolidating our uses and trying to stick to a little bit of a tighter area and sticking to trails to collect water.
Yeah, well, it's almost like, I would say, kind of a two-pronged recommendation, because you want to consolidate your usage when there is an already impacted area. But if you are going off trail for any reason, like to collect firewood, to get water, that's when you want to make sure you're trying to, if you're in a group, to try to disperse your usage, or even if it's just yourself, try not to step over the same area that you walked on, so that you're not kind of building up that, getting towards that 25 passes to create that new permanent trail. So it's about making, kind of, you switch your mindset up a little bit depending on what you're doing out there. And then really it's about, again, looking for the most durable option available to you. So like everything with Leave No Trace, it's not a binary, you're either durable or not durable. Everything has some sort of impact when you're walking on it. So it's about looking for the things that will be the least impacted. So, if you have an option between, wet grass, which might be easier to pull up than dry grass, that's not a very durable option. But if you compare that to, the other option is a field of wildflowers, that's going to be less durable and something. So, we want to be smart about it. Think about what's going to be the most resilient, what's going to be able to pop back up and bounce back easily. Unless you're in some sort of extreme situation, like if you're out in the Southwest and there's cryptobiotic soil and it's something that's fragile enough that a single footstep would, pretty much permanently or for a long time impact it. In those areas, you definitely want to consolidate and even walk in your same footsteps. But the general case is, if you're going off trail, try to disperse your usage as much as you can.
Okay. Do you want to explain what cryptobiotic soil is?
Yeah, maybe Elena, you're probably best to do that.
Yeah, cryptobiotic soil is a really awesome kind of phenomenon found primarily in the deserts where algae, fungi, and bacteria grow together to make almost a spongy looking crust on the top of the dusty soil. And this symbiotic relationship between those organisms traps moisture in the ground, and it really helps retain enough water for desert plants to grow. And because it makes this thin crust on the top of the soil, it can be broken up very easily by stepping on it. And it also, because it's growing in the desert, it recovers very, very slowly. So for its full function to recover, one single footstep could take anywhere between 10 and 100 years to grow back. Depending on the environment. And it's really cool to see because it can look like little spongy towers on the ground.
You're not going to be able to spot it just without having any knowledge. It does require some research, kind of what this actually is.
Cool. Number 3.
Number 3, you make a W for waste. And then there's 2 big categories for this. It's so you can have a little claw grabby if you're picking up your trash. Or you're having a little shovel or a trowel and you're scooping your cat hole. So it really comes down to how we're managing our trash and our litter, and also how we're managing our human waste. I did see that you guys just put out a pretty great episode on the 4 Ps.
I love talking about the 4 Ps. But as a broad category, disposing of our waste properly is important because the human health and animal health is just greatly impacted by what comes out of our bodies and the trash that we produce and that sometimes unfortunately gets left behind. And so our ultimate goal is to protect the health of the ecosystem and our own health if we are drinking from the water sources that animals are drinking from, and we also eat food that is produced in nature, and we are all connected. And so in terms of trash, in most places in the outdoors, it's best to pack out everything that we bring in. When we bring things back home with us, we can sort them properly, we can wash them properly so that they might be able to be recycled. And the kind of consolidation of our trash into landfills is one of the most environmentally friendly practices that we have. As much as we can reduce the waste that we produce, the better. But we live in a very plastic dependent society, and so it is a hard challenge in front of us.
Yeah, so it's something that really kind of starts at home, like everything. So it's about your behaviors as a consumer, thinking about what you're actually buying, coming down into how are you packing for your trip, right? So how much waste are you actually going to be carrying out there? How much packaging are you carrying out there? I'm sure you've done some fair share of repackaging in your time as a backpacker. So, from a lightweight standpoint, but also thinking about, okay, everything I have to carry out there, I'm going to have to carry back. And, how can I reduce that? Or I even have the option to maybe leave some of that stuff out. And then the reality is, so much of the stuff just takes much longer than people kind of have conceived to break down. So if it's left out there, it takes, it can take anywhere between a couple of years for biodegradable foods to in millions of years, or even never fully breaking down for some of our plastics out there. And so when we're educating about, dispose of waste properly, that's where we see a lot of those light bulb moments, especially is, even things like, biodegradable orange peels. That's something that there's that common misconception that because it grew from the earth, it can be kind of chucked wherever. And of course, orange peels, especially peels, will, take a couple of years to break down. So they're not just gone in a day or two, which is what some people think. And they're generally going to be non-native food source for wildlife. So they're going to be, not healthy for them. There's a lot of, pretty high sugar concentration in some of these peels as well. So that's not healthy. And then it's going to be habituating animals. So it's, the places we're dropping our peels are the places that we're going, right? So it's the roads, it's the trails. And so we're drawing animals unnaturally to those places more often than they would go. We're increasing that likelihood of interaction between humans and wildlife. And then we're habituating them to return to these places over and over again and start associating them as sources of food. And so I'm sure many people have heard that, the saying, fed is dead, because, we've seen bears that are completely uncontacted wild bears, have their first source of human food and become so habituated to the point that they have to get put down within a matter of a week or two. So it's something that can, drastically change wildlife's behavior very quickly to the point that they are a danger to themselves, to us as well. And so it's a tough one out there. And so we want to make sure that even these things that are natural, we are not, leaving out there. And it, like everything, it comes back to this idea that there's just so many of us going out to these places. And if there are just one or two of us, leaving an orange peel occasionally, it might not be the biggest deal in the world, but when you compound it and accumulate it of all the people who are, hiking the AT and doing these now, and there's so much more people going out, that's when these things become, those really serious issues.
Yeah, we see this kind of concept apply to toilet paper as well. A lot of people are going to the same spots and burying toilet paper, and toilet paper can take a year to 5 years to decompose fully, depending on the environment, of course. But the more we can pack out toilet paper and dispose of it at home, the less likely it's going to be to rise to the surface and leave those wads that might be seen outside. And so by having a designated pack out bag that we feel comfortable putting these items in and then disposing them at home, the better. And even like menstrual products like pads and tampons aren't entirely made from natural fibers anymore. They can have plastics in them, and we certainly want to pack those out. We know that disposable diapers, although sometimes less likely to be seen out on the trail, can take 450 years to fully degrade back into dirt, and that's a long time. So we just want to take those things with us when we leave.
Yeah, and when it comes to talking about human waste and bodily functions, I think it's really important, especially when we're thinking about all the new recreators and new users getting out there, to have that kind of candid dialogue about these things, because these are places where people start to get a little bit uncomfortable to ask questions or to share experiences with. And I again appreciate you guys having that poop episode recently out there. I was listening. That was fun to listen to. But it is something that, it's scary to do for people who are coming out for the first time. They don't know exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and it can be embarrassing to ask. And so, menstrual waste and poop and how to pee out there, and being kind of that safe space to talk about these things is really important for, so if you are a more knowledgeable backpacker, just being open to talk about these things, I think, is a huge boon in spreading that education.
Yeah, because there's some weird stigma behind these very normal biological functions. And I don't know why people don't talk about it.
Everyone poops. It's the old ancient wisdom, right?
Yeah, it's important to talk about. It's also fun to make it into kind of a game and talk about your favorite pooping location, the quality of the experience, how it could improve in the future. All things to kind of normalize this very human or like this very human thing that we all do.
It's true. There's this really common app that we use for longer through hikes called Far Out. Have you heard of it?
No.
Well, you can take pictures or leave comments on a waymark and things like that. And a lot of times you'll see like 10 out of 10 would shit here again or would poop here again. I'm like, okay, well, that's someone like destigmatized the like the fact of poop.
Well, and one big talking point in regard to our pooping outside is that because so many more people are going to the same spots, more land managers are really, really encouraging wag bags, even in environments where there's rich organic soil, simply because of the amount of traffic that a place is experiencing. And so the wag bags, the waste alleviation and gelling bags, are really easy to use, and they deodorize, and it's a lot easier than digging a hole through soil and having to aim in that 4-inch in diameter hole, because the wag bags you can hold right up to your butt and poop straight in. And we've heard, at least in our experience, the record in a single wag bag is pooping 5 times and then packing that single bag out. So there is a way to minimize the plastic usage as well, because the bag is double walled, so there's a bit of plastic in there. But
wait, how big is this wag bag for 5 poops? I mean,
probably a gallon size.
Okay.
Not baby poops, maybe. I don't know.
And to that, it's not just human poops; it's pet poops too.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about why our dog's poo is not fertilizer in the backcountry?
Sure. I mean, it really comes down to the dog's diet. I mean, if you think about what wild animals, what are bears eating, what are deer eating, compared to all the crazy. If you're a dog owner, you know all the crazy things that your dog is eating. But even if you don't, even if they're not eating like random garbage off the street, you can look at the ingredients list of any dog food and see that they're full of preservatives. There's dyes, there's chemicals in these things, and that's all the stuff that gets left behind in dog poop. And that's the short of it of why even though dogs are animals, they have a domesticated diet, and that's introducing a lot of new kind of chemicals to the outdoors. And so that's stuff that has a really, really serious impact, especially on water quality in a lot of places. And it's very hazardous and can get people sick from that, just as much as human poop can in some instances. So it's definitely something that you want to, not only bag and leave behind, but actually bag and take all the way to your garbage as well. Because if you're just bagging it up and leaving it, that's also just introducing more plastic to the environment as well, which is not an ideal solution out there.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've pulled water from a source and seen a big steamy pile like 100 feet upstream. On the topic of peeing and pooping and digging a cat hole, you want to talk about the difference in depth for arid climates digging a cat hole versus 6 to 8 in like a forest or grassland area?
Sure. So the ideal depth, the aspirational depth is about 6 to 8 inches, which is, if you have a trowel, it's generally the size of a trowel. So you can measure it that way. That's going to be the layer of the soil where the microbes that will break down that waste exist. You actually don't want to go too much deeper than that, because then you're not going to have those microbes down there. So even though it most likely won't resurface, it also won't be decomposing the waste. And ultimately, there are kind of 2 goals with our waste management. It's maximizing decomposition and minimizing any sort of disease transfer with that. Now, there are lots of areas like arid climates, so that's rocky, high alpine zones, but also deserts, where digging 6 to 8 inches is either not possible, or most likely it's going to be very dry, so there won't necessarily be those microbes. Now, there's definitely again, it comes back to leave no trace being a spectrum. So the most leave no trace thing you can do is to pack out your waste in those situations. Of course, if you don't have that ability, then you can fall back potentially on digging what hole you can as much as you can. It's important to be aware that that is not going to be the most effective waste management system approach when it comes to maximizing decomposition, which is our goal here. So that stuff will most likely be there for a lot longer than human waste in a wetter environment. So it is something that we do want to, when possible, plan ahead and prepare. Bring those wag bags out there with us. Set up our trip so that we have the ability to pack all that out as much as we can.
Yeah, and whenever I was looking up information on peeing in the backcountry, I didn't realize peeing in alpine terrain where mountain goats live and how they could just rut up the ground. I would never think about that.
Yeah.
Who knew? We had so many delicious salts in our urine. And in nutrient-starved locations, that's a really attractive thing to find. And we have to be mindful of where we're peeing. So we want to pee on durable surfaces that if animals are attracted, they're not tearing up roots as much as possible. So peeing on rocks. But our urine is largely sterile, so it's a little bit different than poop in that way. But we also know that our urine can have pharmaceuticals in it, and some of the medications that we take and hormones pass through our urine. And so we want to pee away from water sources for that reason. We don't want to introduce those pharmaceuticals into our water sources. So we want to pee 200 feet away from water, but we don't have to bury it. We're not trying to maximize decomposition.
Yeah. And it's not just 200 feet away from water. It's also, if you have that ability, 200 feet away from trails. And I know you've mentioned it in prior episodes, but for those who don't know, that's about 70, 75 big steps if you're trying to measure that. But the best case study of that was out in Olympic National Park, where there was so much urine on the trails that even though that might have been a more durable surface at the trail itself, that was attracting all the mountain goats to the point where they were becoming hostile towards hikers. So people were getting attacked by mountain goats who were looking for that delicious pee out there, to the point where they had to relocate and actually put down a lot of mountain goats in the area. So it does have a pretty devastating effect on some wildlife out there. So we don't want to just pee on a durable place. We want to make sure we're trying to disperse that pee as much as we can as well, and not concentrate it in those super populated areas.
We were woken up one time on the PCT to 2 bucks running around our campsite, and they were eating the dirt, the wood chips, all of it. I think that was our learning experience.
Oh my God, yeah, it's crazy to see it the first time, but that's another one of those big light bulb moments of you show someone a rut right there, and you're like, well, that's most likely where someone peed, because some animal was scraping that up, or someone poured their dishwater out there or something. That's when you start to see some gears turn in.
Yeah, and this story is also an example of how we're all trying our best to minimize our impacts, and so we might be winning on one hand of not going off trail and disrupting fragile vegetation, but we are impacting the wildlife. And so in these cases where it's hard to really know what to do, the best thing that we can do is look to what the land managers are guiding us, and what the kind of local knowledge is, because to them it's kind of a daily occurrence, or something that they will know a lot more about the kind of fundamentals of an area. And the more we can plan ahead and read about kind of these situations that we might experience before we go to a place, then we'll have the right knowledge to minimize our impact in that place. Some trails are building more pit toilets, or toilets that are available for people to kind of concentrate their bathroom going, because there's not a great win-win solution otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like most of the trash and waste and even above ground toilet paper that I've seen has been within the first 2 miles or so of a trailhead that you can access with a car. So if they're really looking to install pit crews, like that would be a great method. And put a little toilet, I mean a little trash can in there, and like waste disposal. That would help a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that hits home on the idea that, a lot of the messaging and a lot of the education is definitely best geared towards some of those newer recreators, the folks who are just going the short day hike for the first time out there. I think that also says a lot to the fact that, these solutions are multi-pronged. It comes down to, not only education, that's a big part of it, but also the engineering, like how do we design these areas? How do we build these to be smart and think about how people are actually using them and going to use them. And so all of these things kind of culminate together to build that solution, I think.
Speaking of solutions, you want to talk about number four?
Absolutely.
Sure. Number four is leave what you find. So we have our, let's see, four fingers that we split into two hands. And this principle is kind of represented by the phrase take only photos and leave only footprints. So when we are adventuring, we'll often come across really cool objects, whether that's antlers left behind, rocks, fossils, even artifacts, cool things that we see and experience in a place kind of together build this story and talk about or show what that place was like at different periods of time. And they're awesome to see. They're one of the primary reasons why people go and visit new spaces is to find that sort of discovery. And so we want to leave behind those objects that are special. And it's easy to feel like when we discover, let's say, a fossil or something like that, we want to take that as a little token to remember that place by. But often those tokens end up sitting dusty on a bookshelf somewhere, and we forget about them eventually. And they lose meaning when taken out of the context of that space as well. And so by leaving them behind, we are allowing the people in the future to also have that cool experience that we have. And there are other ways that we can kind of take that memory with us. And one of that is through photography or taking photos of that place. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be by sharing stories or drawing pictures. Some other way of kind of sharing and remembering that experience.
I was gonna say, and not to mention that like the skeletons and the bones and the remains that you see, like they deposit calcium and phosphorus and other nutrients back into the soils from where it came. And if you take it, then that's just an absence of that nutrient that could otherwise be there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely two-pronged, right? It's those natural objects that are returning kind of nutrients to the soils, and especially in areas like, high alpine zones where there's very little tree coverage, like even a branch is something that is returning important nutrients to the soil. But then you have to think about, okay, what about activities like, what if I'm a hunter and I find a beautiful antler dropper? What if I'm into foraging? Am I just not allowed to do these activities anymore? And, from our perspective, the answer is no, you definitely can do these things, but we want to encourage people to be informed about them and understand what they are taking out from the environment and to maybe control the amount that they're taking out. Especially we talk to a lot of parents who, they're bringing kids out on hikes, and kids are big ones who like love taking souvenirs, right? Something that we found is, maybe limit your child to taking one souvenir. So if they're going to take a rock or a shell from the beach, you have to find the one best shell that you're going to take out from that. And having them start to be a little more conscious about, okay, I'm understanding all these, I'm looking at all these things. I have to be a little bit more controlled in what I'm doing, and then start working up to building that ethic to the point where you're able to kind of hopefully leave these things behind as much as possible.
Yeah, this principle is one of the most reflective principles that we talk about because understanding our needs, but also how we can easily fall into this desire for excess. And we want to take what we need and what we will use and that is meaningful to us, and leave as much as we can for others so that it's meaningful and is useful to them as well. And that could be other people, it could be other animals, it could be leaving behind wildflowers so that they sprout again next season.
Yeah, and it's not just about the nutrients and returning the soil, right? It has that social component too. So you have to be aware that, you know, if you're picking wildflowers, that's less wildflowers that other people are going to be able to experience. And ultimately, we come out to these outdoor spaces to have these experiences. So we're actively degrading that by taking these things out of the environment.
Don't take the cursed rock from Hawaii or Iceland and then mail it back.
Or petrified,
yeah, the curse, yeah. Artifacts too is another big one, and a lot of times people, you know, they obviously have more of a cultural significance than a natural one, but a lot of times people get so excited about them, and even with good intentions, are like, oh my God, I found this. This is like an important discovery. I'm gonna go bring this to the visitor center and give this to the rangers, and that's a whole other issue because, you know, a lot of times these things have already been discovered and are purposely being left there. Or, you know, it's important that the archaeology teams actually understand where these things were found. So by taking them out, it's almost impossible for them to like kind of retrace that step. So it's, you know, harming their ability to kind of do that research on these spaces as well and have these understandings. And then, yeah, it can be, of course, really disruptive to these important heritage sites that can get so easily trashed by people who are not informed about their kind of importance.
Yeah. So the best thing to do if you find a really cool artifact is to leave it where it is, take a picture, and then report it to the land managers, and record where that location was so that they're aware that it's there. And then depending on, I mean, different public spaces are managed in different ways. So they might take it and bring it to an archaeologist, or they might leave it. Some places will mark it on a map and protect it either with barriers so that other people know that it's there, but know that they should look at it from a distance. Other land managers will not do anything and just leave it in the soil somewhere.
Well, there are places around the country that it's illegal to actually mark or like kind of geotag some of these archaeological sites because of that risk of once it's publicly available, then everyone will, you know, there's much more people going to look at it and going to potentially damage it. So it's definitely a nuanced kind of land management strategy. And so it's important to be aware of these things before you go in, especially if you're going to like geotag or publicly share some information about these things. That can definitely be a problem.
It makes me think of the Methuselah tree. They won't disclose the location or area of it. Speaking of trees, it leads me to the thought of firewood, which takes us to campfires. See how that happened?
Number 5, great segue, very artfully done. Yeah.
So our principle number 5 is minimize campfire impacts. We have our 5 fingers, we make a little fire, and then we put our fire out by drowning it with water at the end. And this principle is one of my favorites because it is there's a huge spectrum in terms of how we minimize campfire impacts. Because on one hand, campfires are awesome. They can really bring people together. It can have cultural significance, and sometimes a camping trip doesn't feel like a camping trip without a campfire. But on the other hand, campfires can be very destructive and devastating when they get out of hand. And simply because fires are hot, they always are having an impact. So when we are burning fuel, we are removing a nutrient source from some environment somewhere. And so the more that we can understand this impact and maybe weigh our decisions with this in mind better. So first and foremost, we want to consider whether or not campfires are allowed in the space that we're in. We always must default to the precautions or restrictions in certain environments. So sometimes there might be high winds or heavy dry fuel loads on the ground that can increase the risk of wildfires catching. And in those cases, we of course want to revert to our alternatives. And I'll mention those in a moment, because our second consideration is, do we really need a campfire? And typically, the having a fire kind of falls into 4 different use cases, and that's, we use it for warmth, for light, for cooking, and for entertainment. And in each of those categories, there are alternatives that we can use instead of building a fire. And so if we're looking for warmth, we can bring extra clothes. If we're looking for a light source, we can use headlamps and lanterns, something to create that ambiance if that's what we're seeking out. For cooking, we can use a stove or even prepare food beforehand that doesn't need to be heated. And for entertainment, there's storytelling, there's games, there's moving around or dancing. Yeah. The list goes on.
So when you ask the question, do I need a campfire? It sometimes it's hard to say you do, right? So there's so many alternative options. I mean, just for reference, Elena and I are essentially full-time campers, and I can count on one hand the number of times we've actually lit a campfire in the past few years. So, it's definitely something that you're able to have great experiences without. But of course, they are fun things to do if you can control them properly.
I think I thought of a 5th reason you can need a fire.
What is that?
White Walkers.
White Walkers, yes. Protecting from monsters. That's another one.
Yes, exactly. To the topic of campfires, what do you consider a fire ring? Do you consider that a metal structure built at a campground, or like a makeshift rock ring that someone made?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything that can be perceived as a place to be a fire, I would consider to be a fire ring. I wouldn't necessarily consider that to be a proper place to build a fire, but if it's signaling people to that area, that's going to be I ultimately fall under that definition, I would say. And so there's actually a problem with that, is that, people can build many fire rings in a small area. They're not oftentimes needed, and they're not oftentimes, maintained as properly as they should be. That's a hard judgment call to make, though, if you're not, already an expert outdoorsman and have an understanding of these things, whether this is going to be a good place to have a fire. But there are a couple of rules of thumb just to kind of check on whether this is built in a good location. Elena, what are the good locations?
We want to build our fire ring on soil that is not full of life. So rich organic soil is going to be vulnerable to the heat of the fire.
Yeah, you actually sterilize the soil up to 6 inches below it when you're having that fire. So that's actually precluding, vegetation from growing there after you have that fire.
Yeah, and so looking for kind of that mineral soil, pebbles, rocks, sand are all good spots to have a fire. And we can also leave scars on rock walls from the smoke of fire. So having our firing away from vertical walls, even if they seem like they're useful for protecting us from the wind, we want to minimize our charring as much as possible. And then just be aware of the vegetation overhead. So if there are trees above you, this really depends on the environment. So if it has rained recently, those aren't going to be as vulnerable as if it's a really dry climate. But the size of our fire is hugely important. So the type of firewood or the size of the firewood that we burn is important. And in the front country, so places where you can drive to or places that have bathrooms, we recommend burning logs no larger than your wrist in diameter. And in the backcountry, we recommend burning sticks no larger than your pinky in diameter. And this is with the intention of being able to burn through the wood entirely so that when we're done with our fire, we're not leaving charred logs, and we can minimize the evidence of that fire ever being there. And we also are much more capable of putting out the fire entirely when it's burnt entirely to ashes. It's hard to put out half burnt logs, and so by having our fires in pre-existing fire rings, we're also minimizing the amount of charring that we're spreading to new areas.
Yeah. So I think the question maybe shouldn't be, is this a fire ring that I should use? It should maybe be, is this a good place to have a fire in general? And if you're able to understand, that rationale that Elena was talking through, I think then you're able to make that kind of more informed decision.
And what would you say are the best steps for putting out a fire? When you see dead out, is that water and sand?
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly, if you have access to water, it's really drowning it out with water as much as you can. So you want to be able to, it should be physically cool to the touch. You want to make sure you're stirring those ashes as well, so you're making, a nice campfire stew of muck out there. And then if you are in a backcountry area, instead of putting sand on it, we actually encourage, once the ashes are fully out, to scatter those away so that you are reducing the evidence that you did have that fire there. So you're not creating a new fire ring. You're not encouraging people to continue having fires in that same spot and then kind of impact that ground more permanently.
Gotcha. And the reason I asked about the fire ring is because I saw this for the first time this last weekend. A sign that said use designated fire rings only. And it's a large ATV route. And the only fire rings out there are hand-built stone fire rings. I had never seen them called that before.
Yeah, we've seen that too in our travels because we camp in dispersed camping spots all the time.
Yeah.
And for the most part, the land managers keep, well, at least a handful that we've talked to, keep count or keep track of the fire rings that are built by people. So they do look like hand-built stone fire rings. And it is hard work that unfortunately is often put on land managers to disassemble rings that they don't want people to use. And so that practice varies based on the public space. But if there's a sign that says use designated fire rings, and there is a ring of rocks that looks like it had a fire in it previously, that's probably going to be the spot that you want to have a fire. The ultimate goal is to dissuade people from building new fire rings.
Yeah. And I would say it's probably good practice to, if you come up on a fire ring and it looks like it's been kicked in, to not use it, right? The land manager has tried to stop that one.
Yeah, they'll try to be as obvious as they can. We've taken down some fire rings with land managers before, and it's really trying to scatter the stones, bury the ring, put branches over it. So they do try to, generally, in our experience, have tried to make it as unappealing as possible to have a fire there in the future. So hopefully it should be fairly obvious.
I want to mention in this category, there are two methods of building a fire, a campfire, that have almost no evidence of that fire ever being there once you're done with it, and that's using a fire pan, which is building a fire in a metal kind of container that sits on top of the soil.
Essentially a vegetable steamer.
It does look like a vegetable steamer. And it's a very small fire built with small sticks the size of your pinky, but you contain it on this metal pan, and then once you've burnt through all the wood and the ashes are drowned, you can scatter the ashes somewhere else, and it doesn't leave any evidence of that burn ever being there on the ground. And the other method of building a fire is using a mound fire, where you can lay like a cloth or a tarp. The heat or fire resistant tarps are the best, and then putting mineral soil or like sand or gravel on top of that tarp. That way you're insulating the soil underneath from the heat of the fire, and you kind of build up this mound that looks like a donut with a little indent on the in the middle, and your fire is contained in that little space on top. And again, once you drown out your fire at the end, you can scatter those ashes and pick up the tarp, and it's like you were never there.
It's kind of like how a sweet mom or grandmother from Italy will like feel out the ingredients when they're making the dough for their pastas. They'll build up a mound and then they'll put the eggs inside of it.
Yeah.
So if you can't remember that fire ring construction method, just remember pasta making.
Yes.
And this next one, we've actually had some recent issues with this, more specifically because we have a dog now. To minimize or respect wildlife. And this last weekend, our dog, we were in the backcountry, we had her on a leash, but she broke the buckle on the leash and she chased after a herd of deer. I'm like, what do you do? I mean, unless you have a kill switch to shock your dog to not be able to run, which is completely inhumane, like, what do you do?
Yeah, wow. I mean, the buckle breaking is kind of an act of God situation where it's hard to put blame on the owner for that. But obviously that can be very impactful to wildlife. So, the two, I think we've kind of transitioned into the sixth principle, which is to respect wildlife. So it's make 3 fingers on each. You can make some antlers with that.
Or and we have a turkey.
And yeah, there's a lot of hand signs for this one. But there's really those 2 ways that you do it. It's giving them space and I not chasing them down or not getting too close. That's for humans and for dogs. And then there is making sure we're using proper food storage and like food safety. And when it comes to the first one, getting close and keeping your dogs not from getting close, a lot of times, out in the wild, it's hard for humans to appreciate it sometimes, but energy stores and the amount of energy an animal and stress an animal is exerting can be really a life or death kind of threshold there. So getting chased by a dog can, even if it's not an immediate reaction, that can really be, having to exert that energy and that increase in stress can ultimately be the difference between life and death for some of these animals out there. So it is something we definitely want to be aware of and try to minimize as much as possible. So there's the classic thumb trick, which is where you hold up your thumb and you close one eye and you should be able to cover up the animal completely behind your thumb. And that's like a good indication as a human for how close I should be getting. But for dogs, it's ultimately, we can't put any blame on them. Of course, it's ultimately up to us to do our best to have them leashed. And even in areas where, we're in the backcountry, there's no one else out there, there's probably your dog's not going to like come into another person. They can and most likely will be coming across wildlife. We were talking to someone recently who was sharing an anecdote where, they were walking and there's a couple with their dog off a leash and, he was fine with it. But, the dog goes out of sight for, 5 minutes and he sees it, grab a squirrel, break its neck, and then run back to the owners. And the owners had no idea that anything even happened. And so these interactions can happen really quickly and without your knowledge, especially if your dog is not on the leash. So it is really important to be mindful of how they are behaving out there because, again, we don't have direct control over them to that degree, and it's not their fault if they're going to interact with wildlife that way.
And there are locations where it just might be better to leave our furry friends behind too, just because the presence and the smell of dogs can affect wildlife's behaviors or even prevent them from coming to spaces that they normally come to mate or engage with other animals of their kind. And so again, this falls into the planning ahead and preparing phase, but knowing kind of the wildlife that we might encounter in a space. I know, I mean, it's rare for some dogs to encounter mountain goats, or there's all these new animals that they're not used to engaging with, and so we just don't know how they're going to behave when that time comes.
Yeah, we've had to be really careful with moose territory with our dog.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just, a danger of your dog, it's a danger to your dog potentially in a lot of these instances. There's wildlife that can take down your dog, definitely.
Yeah, snakes are one of them.
I mean, a cactus has taken our dog out before, so we've been looking at this thing. It's called Heel, and it's a collar, and you don't have to push any buttons. You set certain radiuses for it, and it's an e-collar, like in conjunction with leash use. But
Yeah, for sure. It's ultimately just about having a degree of control on them. So yeah, I'd be definitely interested to see how that works out.
yeah, for sure, we will too if we ever get one. Cool. Did y'all want to go to the last principle?
Yeah, I think so. Our final principle is number 7. It's to be considerate of others. So you have your wave and your peace sign out there. And this is one that I think is actually sneakily one of the hardest for especially our most intense outdoor stewards to abide by, because it can be really easy, like we were talking about earlier, to get kind of jaded about some of these things when you see people doing the wrong thing. And ultimately, the overall goal is for everyone to have a positive experience in our outdoors, because it's a shared space, right? It's somewhere that we all have a right to as much as everyone else. Even if they're not an expert or haven't grown up in this area for generations, they have just as much right to this space and to use it as you do, as long as everyone is using it respectfully. But everyone, of course, has a different definition of what using a space respectfully means. And so really, we want to encourage people to kind of take the onus and take the responsibility of going to a space where they can have the experience that they are hoping to have, rather than trying to impart that experience on a place that's maybe not equipped to that. So say, if you were going out and you're going to a popular park on like 4th of July weekend, and if you're getting mad that there are other people out there and maybe being loud, maybe even playing music, that's ultimately on you to a certain degree, right? It's not necessarily up to these people to kind of change their behavior. So a lot of times we talk to people and they're so stoked. They're like, finally, we can tell people that they have to stop being loud and they have to start appreciating the sound of nature. And that's maybe how you like to appreciate nature, but that's not necessarily how everyone does. Sometimes people think of it as a social space, so that's totally valid as well. And so again, we just want to be aware, and if we're having conversations with people, we really about their behavior and about the outdoors, we always want to keep them as positive as possible. So it's, making sure that we're never, yelling at someone. It ultimately might be an impulse that someone might have, but it's never going to be an effective way to ultimately achieve your goal, which is to, help this person be a better steward, or be, more considerate of the outdoors in some ways, or to change their behavior for the long term, right? If they had that bad experience, they're not going to want to change their behavior.
Yeah, and we talk to all sorts of folks who go outside to socialize with friends. They love having fires and playing music, but at the same time, there are many people who go outside as that kind of escape. So they're trying to hear the sounds of nature and view wildlife. And we can't say that one use is better or more important than the other. And one conversation that I had with a woman who she felt that she was struggling to talk with people who she came across who were playing music, and that really bothered her on the trail. And she's like, do I engage with them? What do I say? Because like I want to hear the birds. And I brought up the point that sometimes people are coming onto trails for the first time, and we, living in cities, are used to noise constantly, and hearing the sound of nature is a foreign concept, and it takes some getting used to. And we might feel a little uncomfortable by silence until we realize what we're hearing when that silence takes hold. And having this conversation with this woman completely changed her perspective. And she's like, I didn't realize that people might be uncomfortable by silence. And so having that conversation with these folks in a really open-ended way can invite them to start listening for these other sounds, like listen, or invite people to listen to the birds chirping instead of scolding them to turn off their music and things like that. And the more we can be inviting and respectful and considerate of all these different backgrounds that people come from, the better off we're all going to be, and the more likely everyone's going to feel like they want to take care of these spaces.
Yeah, and the less music that you play, the more likely you are to see wildlife too. So that could be another incentive to maybe like taper that practice off.
For sure. You know, it's
Yeah.
about it comes down to being excited about the outdoors and sharing these things with others without forcing them to adhere to the way that you perform. So it's just, sharing positive energy and positive intentions out there.
Oh yeah, when you start slapping rules on people, they start pushing back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can never tell someone what to do, really, right? You have to, if you're going to try to change how they think, ultimately you're going to be way more effective if they think it's their idea. So if you tell them about the birds in the area, if you share some knowledge about this space, maybe they'll come to that conclusion on their own that, oh, maybe we should listen for these things because there's, amazing wildlife in this area.
Would you say that this last principle also encompasses like trail etiquette, like yielding to horses, bikers yielding to hikers, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. The yield triangle, if anyone is familiar with it, is, the fact that horse or equestrian or horseback riders always have the right of way, except for adaptive recreationalists. Um, and mountain bikers are supposed to yield to everyone, meaning you actually stop riding, get off your bike, and step to the side to let someone pass. Um, and through that, and then of course, regular hikers are kind of in the middle of that, so they yield to equestrians, but bikers yield to them, theoretically. And so that's kind of a imparting some sort of rules onto the trail that generally we hope people follow. I think the reality is that it's not always followed very well. So it's something that you need to not just rely on. You need to be smart, especially if you're hiking on a multi-use trail, and be aware of others coming through you.
Yeah, the yielding system is also to protect everyone's safety.
Yeah.
And so adaptive recreationalists and horses often just need more space to feel safe and to maneuver in the proper way.
Yes, if you try to inch by a horse, there's a good chance that you could get hurt on a trail.
Yeah, and so if you're more able-bodied and capable of giving them that space, we ought to. And in terms of use trails that have biking and hiking on them, bikers have this mechanical advantage that allows them to speed up and slow down faster than hikers. And their speed can make biking dangerous. And so we are, through the yield system, putting mountain bikers kind of as that use that yields to everyone, because we want them to be considerate of the speed and the almost power that they have. However, there are situations where if they slow down and acknowledge the other users, for example, if the biker is going uphill and the hikers are going downhill, it might be easier for the hiker, once they recognize each other, to move off trail and be less destructive to the vegetation on the side of the trail than the biker. And in that case, we just want to give the time of day to the other people on the trail, so that they feel recognized and can have that engagement and decide kind of together what the best course of action is. Another situation in which this happens is when hikers run into each other hiking in different directions, and those who are hiking uphill have more work that they're putting into and can sometimes be considered to be like in need of that momentum. And so if you're headed downhill, it's easier for you to stop, move off the trail, and let those hiking uphill to continue. But sometimes those people hiking uphill need a break, and they're like, "Oh no, you go ahead." And in which case, if you have that engagement, that's as good of a situation as we could ask for.
Yeah, I think, always be communicating out there as much as possible. I think the yield sign is a good start, but the reality is it's not a wholesale solution. So it is something that, we want to talk out and be contextual with it, and every situation is a little bit different.
Yeah, I found that like communicating when you're about 100 feet away from the other like party person, whoever, this has worked well. I usually end up passing bikers on uphills, but I always yield to them on downhills because I feel like it's more dangerous to stop and try and position onto the side than it is for me to just like take 2 steps off to the side of the trail.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of twofold, right? Like it's
Yeah.
partially about, is it harder to start and stop going uphill, but also when you're going downhill, you usually have a better like view of the land. You have a better survey of the trail. You're able to find like a good place to pull off a nice durable surface. You're able to kind of set yourself up for that situation beforehand. So usually that it's good manners to do so as much as possible.
Yeah. I will say the last thing, if you're listening to this and you're a mountain biker or a dirt biker, etc., just let people on foot know how many are in your party and how many are still behind you. Like that's such a helpful tactic. Like just put up 5 or like 1 or 0 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely have experienced that, and that's always a great help because
Yeah.
okay, we're waiting for one more person to come by, and yeah, that's great communication out on the trail.
Well, I know we talked about a lot of these different principles, 7 in total, but people have different learning styles, and maybe just listening to a podcast episode won't make the topic sink in as opposed to like working through their own lesson. So I know that Leave No Trace offers a lot of free courses on these principles. And what about other stuff? Are the courses free or are they paid? What does it look like? I don't know about y'all, but one thing that helps me to be as responsible and leave no trace savvy as possible whenever I'm out in the backcountry camping is to stay on top of my game. And for me, staying on top of my game means having all of the equipment and necessities or things that I deem to be a necessity at hand and readily available. And also not having to rush through the day just to make it to some designated campsite before dark. And I feel like having everything ready and at your disposal makes that process easier. So we actually have a few discount codes here that we feel would make your through hike this 2024 season more efficient, more doable, and just allow you to have things at the ready. So the first two are going to be from the same company. This is actually Canuck and Diorite. They are from the same parent company, and you can use the same discount code for both of these companies. So Canuck is where you're going to get your water bladders and some water bottles. Diorite produces largely trekking poles. And I don't know about you, but for me, trekking poles definitely increase my hiking pace because they allow me more stability and they give me a little bit more push whenever I'm walking. So again, Canuck and Diorite, the same discount code is going to get you 15% off. It is just the name of our podcast, Yeti Walks into Basecamp. And for these discount codes, just go into our show notes and use the links provided. And we also have the code written out there for you. All you have to do is go through that link, use that code, and you'll get your 15% discount on your entire purchase. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is also water related, similar to Canuck. That's going to be the aqua tabs. So Basecamp and I, sometimes we don't want to stop for 10, 15, 20 minutes to filter water. And that's no knock against any water filter companies, but sometimes we think that the water source is relatively clean enough to where we can just fill up a water bottle, drop a chlorine tablet in there, and keep going. And we've tried a lot of chlorine tablets to chlorinate our water. No, we don't use bleach to do it. And the ones that we have found we like best are aqua tabs. So all you do is you fill up a 1 liter bottle of water, then you add 1 tablet in there, and that 1 tablet treats 1 liter of water in 30 minutes. So you only have a half hour to sit and let it cook before it kills all the bad bacteria and any other parasites that might be in your water. So for AquaTabs, similarly, all you got to do is just go into our show notes and use that link provided and just plug in the code Yeti Walks into Basecamp. Again, it's the same exact code as it is for Canuck and Diorite. There's a trend here, right? And that is also going to get you a 15% discount on your entire purchase from AquaTabs. So that is a 15% discount for AquaTabs, Canuck, and Diorite, where you can get stuff like water purification tablets, aka chlorine. Don't use iodine routinely, please. You can get trekking poles from Diorite, and you can get those water bladders and water bottles from Canuck. They're all 15% off, and the code is Yeti Walks into Basecamp for every single one of them. So check out the links in the show notes, and happy hunting.
So there's a variety. So the online courses are, for the most part, free. We have a wide variety that are currently or now available online, but also we're continuing to add more and more courses every day. It's, you know, part of this push to make this knowledge as accessible as possible. So we have, you know, free online courses that cover anything from, you know, the basics, what are these 7 principles that we talked through today, up to, you know, much more of that psychology component. So, you know, how do you have that one-on-one conversation with someone out on the trail? You know, how do you, if you're a land manager, how do you write signage that's going to be effective and going to get people to actually read it? So those are all available on for free on our website. And then we also offer we have more certification programs that allow you to not only learn this information, but be a teacher of this information or spread this information and have that certificate to do so and give future workshops. So we have anything from a 2-day, which is called our level 1 certificate, to our 5-day, which is our level 2 certificate. And those are paid generally. They're, you know, given by different providers, so there's different price structures for those. But those are now used to be, you know, intensive in the field, but now especially for the 2-day option, we have fully virtual, fully remote ones so that everyone has that ability to do those courses. And really we rely on this kind of train the trainer model. So we are ultimately we're a relatively small organization. So it can't just be us talking these things. It's really more of that grassroots movement and getting people equipped to share this information is really where we start to see, you know, some of those positive changes and building up that culture.
So there are kind of a good place to start would be to take the free awareness workshop that's online, and that covers the 7 principles and their basics, and I believe is about 45 minutes long. And then from there, you can kind of decide if you want to go the route of being able to teach other people, or if you're looking just for knowledge to empower yourself to minimize your impact and leave no trace as best as possible. There's a skills course that is 2 days long for that kind of recreational use. And then the level 1 course that Jesse mentioned is to teach you how to teach other people. And that's kind of the next step. And you can go down that route and train yourself and certify yourself. But I also wanted to add that leave no trace is not just something that we do on trips or like long trips or trips even outside. It's this mentality that we also want to incorporate into our daily life. And the leave no trace daily life principles are a kind of subsection, and there's a course online on these principles as well, that tell us how we can incorporate leave no trace into how we purchase everyday items and how we transport ourselves and the energy that we use. And that's honestly, I think, one of the most important things that we can do, because everyone can incorporate leave no trace into our going around the house and daily activities.
I think on your website you have a statistic that says that one person trained in LNT principles goes on to inform or educate how many other people?
I believe it's 256 people on average. So you
That's
have a
crazy.
wide range, yeah, once you have that training.
We we kind of infiltrate. But the more we can talk about it with our friends and family, the more it's incorporated into our daily lives, and we can not only show through examples to other people, but we can kind of encourage and be that cheerleader for our spheres of influence to incorporate Leave No Trace as well.
And you both have such positive personalities about you. I think if I didn't know anything about LNT and you started talking to me about it, I would be receptive just because of like your dispositions.
Well, appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, that's a key ingredient right there. It's just, we want the outdoors to be a positive place, and it's up to the community to build that kind of energy and build that environment.
Well, is there anything else that y'all wanted to add to this? That kind of wraps up all the questions I had for.
Um, I I guess I'll kind of finish up with the reiteration of what you just said. And ultimately, we're an organization that empowers individuals to make small, tangible steps to preserve our favorite spaces. And this can be applied all around the globe, from our homes to our parks to the way wilderness areas out there, and everywhere in between. And though the actions that we recommend might seem small, when it's added up over the hundreds of thousands of people just trying their best, it can make a really big difference in how these places can be enjoyed for generations to come.
And one small change or one small act like that, like picking up a piece of trash that's not yours, like that leads to a second, and that's a mindset change. And whenever that kicks in, like that's the goal.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I like to call Leave No Trace, in the world of environmental movements, Leave No Trace is kind of your gateway drug. It's something that it's easy to do. It gets you start being aware of these things, gets you start caring about the environment, and that really is what's going to set you down that path of keeping building upon that.
And it
That's
becomes
so great.
easier and easier. The
Yeah.
more you practice Leave No Trace, the more second nature it becomes.
Now that you've called it a gateway drug, it just means you need more and more of it after you start using
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, you're looking for that next challenge
Yeah.
of leaving less of an impact.
Yep.
Well, speaking of impact, I want to continue following y'all to see what kind of impact you have on the communities you visit. Where can I and other people find you at?
Yeah, so we are on every major social media platform. Our handle on I think Instagram is probably our primary platform, which is Leave No Trace org, all one word. We also have a really robust YouTube library, which is Leave No Trace Center is our handle. If you just search Leave No Trace on YouTube, you'll find it, where we have hundreds and hundreds of videos available for all the skills that you might want to learn, up to lesson plans for how to teach about specific principles, games to play if you're teaching kids. So we have a wide variety of different topics. Honestly, if you search on our channel and find or can't find a video that you're looking for, let us know, because we kind of think we've made every video possible on this subject. So it's really, really robust. Of course, we're on TikTok as well, Leave No Trace org, same as our Insta handle. And then Facebook is Leave No Trace Center as well. So all the popular social media platforms.
If
Is,
if you don't know where to start, the website at www.lnt.org kind of will take you wherever you need to go. And there are as many resources on there as we can possibly pack in. We're adding new online courses at an ongoing rate and trying to
yeah.
make things as open source as possible. So that's a great way to find how you can get involved and the events that we host all across the country. So if you go to the events page on the website, you can see if we'll be coming to an area near you as well.
That's exciting. Are you coming to Colorado anytime soon?
Yeah, we'll be in Colorado
In June.
June.
We will be at the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, actually. I also want to mention the Spotlight program is one of our biggest kind of ongoing engagements with different communities all across the country. We are not the only traveling team. There are 3 teams kind of circling around each other. And we hold this event called a Spotlight in conjunction with different local organizations, in which our goal is to kind of shine a light on the communities that are incorporating Leave No Trace into their public spaces. And this event is 3 days long, and it involves a education or training portion, a public outreach portion, and a stewardship or like cleanup component. And that's a great way to kind of get to know the organization is finding a spotlight nearby.
Or if we're not coming to a spot near you, we encourage you to apply for a spotlight and have us come to you. Make it easy on yourself.
They are nomination based. So each year, different areas will get nominated or nominate themselves, and we'll select. I think we have around 20 or so each year, and that number fluctuates, but they are a very fun way to get to know the organization, and our goal is to kind of kick off this Leave No Trace momentum that then that community can take the resources and run with them.
That's a great opportunity. So look that up, folks. The Spotlight opportunity. So I'm going to ask this: are y'all ever going to switch to an e-vehicle?
So it's in the works. I'm not sure how much we can share, but we are, of course, partnered with Subaru. And Subaru now does have the Solterra, which is an electric vehicle. Our office has just received our first Leave No Trace Solterra. Of course, there's a lot of logistic challenges still when it comes to the infrastructure and the amount of driving that we do. We want to get to EVs as fast as possible, but we're also making sure that we can go out to places, out in the wilderness. We're going up to Montana and Wyoming and long drives across the country. That could be a little bit challenging still with the amount of charging stations and the battery capabilities, but we're slowly building it up, and we're have some future partnerships in the works that might make that more possible for us. Elena and I will be piloting some EV testing of using our EVs in Colorado this summer as well. We'll be taking it out to one of the spotlights that we mentioned out in Eagle Vale area. So we're excited about that, and we'll see how it goes, and hopefully we can keep building on it from there.
That is exciting.
Yeah, it really is.
We're really excited about it.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest kind of criticisms that we get is that we're an environmental organization, but we drive so much, and we are really excited to kind of showcase how you can travel and adventure while kind of lessening that fossil fuel load that is needed.
Yeah, the carbon footprint's hard to reduce, but also it's hard to camp in close to zero or like freezing temperatures with an e-vehicle.
Yep, that's a challenge as well.
Yeah, kills the battery.
Yeah.
Cool. And there's one other site that you had mentioned earlier, your blog, Elena. Where can people follow that blog at?
Yes, it's called The Water Hole, and my blog is located at thewaterhole.beehive.com. I talk a lot about how we are doing on our travels and kind of the misadventures that we might have, but also it's kind of grounded in the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, the United Nations, and how that relates to our everyday lives.
Yeah. So if you're curious about our personal goings on, check out Elena's blog, The Water Hole. Otherwise, we post all the time on the Leave No Trace social media, so you can see our smiling faces over there as well, talking more about Leave No Trace and the 7 principles.
Love it. It sounds like there's no shortage of resources to keep up with like the current events that Jesse and Elena are going through.
Oh yeah, as much as we can. For sure.
I love that. No, and I think it's important because people need to know what's happening out there and that folks are trying to make an impact. So thanks for staying so current. I know firsthand that staying current on social media can be time consuming and stressful. So thanks for doing
Especially when you live out of your car and don't have internet.
Oh, I'll bet. Dude, well, Jesse, Elena, thank you so much for taking almost 3 hours out of your evening to talk to us tonight.
Oh yeah,
course.
it's been a great 3 hours.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for hopping on the show, and we look forward to following your adventures and seeing where you're heading up.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Well, everyone, we hope that you enjoyed listening to those 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2 of Leave No Trace with Jesse and Elena. As much as I enjoyed interviewing them and being able to sit in and listen to, almost 3 hours of facts and knowledge about Leave No Trace, I definitely nerded out on all that information there for a bit. So loved it. Jesse and Elena have such great positive energy when it comes to this stuff. And I appreciate that, unlike me in the past, they do not have a condemning mindset when it comes to looking at Leave No Trace and educating people and making sure that everyone does their part to keep our planet beautiful and as healthy as possible, honestly. That being said, I think it is high time to give a big rounding shout out to The Fire Once Lost for our intro and our outro track. Thank you so much. The name of the track that we use is called Appalachian Trail. It's the only instrumental that they have at this time, but they have released at least 2 new tracks. So you should go into our show notes and find the link to their Spotify and their socials so that you can go and listen to their music. And whenever you get done listening to all of our episodes, you can listen to the Fire Once Lost albums as well. And speaking of episodes, we now have 2 paid subscriber episodes. You can subscribe through Spotify, through Apple, or even through Patreon as well. All 3 subscriptions will get you access to these subscriber-only episodes. And I mean, if you can't get enough of our content, just know that that option is there to get those additional paid subscriber episodes. And each subscription goes towards making our podcast possible so that we continue to produce the best quality episodes and that we're able to continue making podcasts in the first place. They don't pay for themselves. It's kind of a labor of love. So anything that anyone is willing to offer is super helpful. And we really appreciate everyone listening and all of your support. And even just some kind words go a long way through an email. So thank you, everyone who's reached out to us. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to making an unknown number of podcast episodes in the future. So thank you all so much. And that being said, Basecamp, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to have to tell everyone happy trails without you. So happy trails.